So that's funny. I stab at it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
One of our clients right now is actually one of the largest AI clients out there. I'll call them Acme AI
Hmm.
in this podcast. But I remember my mom came over to see the kids not long ago, and she said, "How does an AI have make money?" And like I realized it still wasn't clicking forward. This is $1 billion company. And what I try to explain to other people is when you're a CRO or a CFO, you have let's use small numbers even. There's $120 million you have to get out the door. So who's talking to the customers? How do they know what customers to talk to? What are they sending the customers? When they do talk to the customers, what are they doing next? And if you do get a quote out and an order comes in, where does it go? Like, I feel like people
Hmm.
don't understand that there's a whole business. I mean, for me, it's operations, but there's a whole business behind it. So what's a number on yours? Like when you're talking about revenue operations, what does that mean? Like when you wake up every day, you're like, dang, here's the 40 million or here's the 2 billion. And then talk to us about revenue operations in that lens. What's that mean for you?
In terms of the money, we always want to talk about the money. Yeah. So let's say I'm running a 75 million ARR business and I'm supporting it from RevOps angle. To
Yeah.
your point, it's very much the people, the process, the tech all sitting on top of it to make sure that that can be executed against. When it comes to having AI in the mix, I think there's little efficiencies to be gained. But to your point, there's a massive, massive information layer that needs to be instrumented at all times to keep that neat and tidy. I'm seeing AI make that cleaner over time, but we're still
Yeah.
learning about it in real time. So there's a lot of admin work that I'd love to automate. I just can't quite get there yet. So I'm really trying to work through right now in the day to day. How do I use the tools and the systems that we all have to use and start to
Right.
supplement that with something that adds efficiency? And it's still an unknown. We still have to use and grapple with architecture to be able to
Yeah.
execute on what people need to be supported in the customer journey.
Yeah. I think so. I love that you said customer journey. I had, when I worked for WebRoot is a little cybersecurity
Hmm.
firm. Do you know them?
Yeah, I do.
I love that. I love that company. They headhunted me out of a niche retail integration firm. I was doing retail integration for Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, and they
Mhm.
brought me in for API integration. I was like, what is sales operations? But my point is, my team, when I finally took over as director there, I had 23 people in offices in Sydney, Tokyo, Dublin, and Denver. And what I would ask you, or I think what people don't understand is like, if those 23 people didn't exist and Salesforce wasn't doing what it does or HubSpot or whatever people are using, who hurts? Like
Yeah.
who's losing out when I call them the hamsters in the wheel. I've been doing this a long time, so it's the term of
Yep.
it. But when the
Yep.
hamsters stop spinning in the wheel, who gets hurt in the business?
Yeah. The people doing the selling, the people doing that work.
Yeah, yeah,
100%. I go
yeah,
around and round about this. I had this conversation with somebody today. There was a comment made of, can't we just, have one admin in there doing that? Or can't AI do this? And it's
yeah,
just not there yet. And so there has to be kind of this parallel path where it feels sticky. We know it's sticky. We don't want these massive Salesforce teams anymore. But when you still see those roles open at these really big companies, and for that matter, at these giant AI companies, they're still fighting the same problem. If it had been solved for,
for
it'd be
sure.
solved for.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a lot. I do want to talk a lot about AI because it's all the rage right now. What I will say, two things. I was with a portco, a portfolio, a PE portfolio company just
Mhm.
before this. So they sold physical goods. They were like 120 million a year. It was a different flavor of sales ops for me because it was a physical product, like
Mhm.
like a container ship stuck off the coast of the Philippines is a whole different problem than like my
Totally.
steel brick is not sinking anymore
Totally.
or
Totally.
new, NUE.
Yep.
Um, what struck me is that because they were 7 years into a PE cycle, I remember the CFO walked into my office and she's like, "Chad, we're not going to do." She essentially said, "You have no budget to do what you want to do. Like it's the next
Yep.
owner's
Yep.
problem." But that CRO was able to plug into ChatGPT and talk about data rails and
Mm.
just start. This is called natural language programming. It's AI is technically not new. It's kind of old. Machine learning's
Mhm.
been with us for a long, long time since the 80s even. but she could just talk through it. Hey, what do I want to do this in data rails. What are these cells? And she was able to get the whole integration done herself, like not even me coming in. So yes, AI took away the dev teams we might have used offshore, in 1 week
Right. Right.
cycles. However, people are discrediting her 30 or 40 years of experience, like
Exactly.
knowing the right questions to ask. So
Exactly.
it is impressive. Oh, the other example is even with the consulting firm I'm with now, we work with a lot of large SaaS companies.
Hmm.
Um, a guy who is, I hear this a lot. I was not originally an engineer, and then they get into like Codex. He
Yep.
built out a whole custom integration in Salesforce. It blew my mind. So you can do a lot with AI.
Yep.
Um, so, but you said customer journey, and I want to bring you back to that because that's wonderful that the CFO was able to do that. That's wonderful that my non-engineer architect firm was able to do that. But like, there's still a big picture. Do you know what I mean? So, what is that
100%.
customer journey? And if we could try one more time to land the whole what is RevOps thing, what does
Yeah.
RevOps mean to the customer journey even then?
So if I were to go even one step back, I would say sales ops is the execution engine. It's this layer
Yeah,
that services the end user, whether it's internal, external, or both. It's territory design, forecasting, pipeline management,
right.
compensation, CRM workflows. RevOps is the revenue system architecture. So it's the end to
Yeah,
end go to market motion. Where do people hear about the brand, get introduced to the brand, convert to be interested in buying, be supported in buying, and then be supported as a customer. So it's all the way marketing, sales, post sales alignment. It is your
100%.
entire kind of commercial data model. And it's the entire tooling ecosystem and the forecasting infrastructure. And so
Yeah.
it is the layer and the function that has to exist for sales ops to support the end user and for the end user to actually execute in those workflows. It's a
Yeah,
higher
it
level
is.
of thinking, maybe.
Well, yes, but you know what it is? It's a boring way of thinking, and I mean that in a super
True.
respectful way because I've gone to business owners. I take for granted like what it's like to work with a $700 million company, $1 billion company. I've gone to business owners that have like investment. They build investment properties, and he's
Mhm.
at 6 million. He wants to be at 12 million. In fact, a lot of my videos on this channel before were really just that. And I said, listen, it's called quote to cash. And like
Yes.
us in revenue operations, we take this for granted. But I have
Yeah.
this little circle I draw, and then there's 4 quadrants. And I'm like, you got to generate leads. You have to get them quotes. Those quotes have to convert into orders, whether that maybe they swiped your
Hmm.
Stripe or they sent you a
Hmm.
purchase order. Then you have to fulfill it, which is what most entrepreneurs love to do. Right here, here's all your
Yep.
engineer founders. And then you have to collect the money. And like if you've ever
Yep.
been on the AR side, I just did the month end with the Philippines team in this last March. It like someone's got to collect the money, and I feel like
Right.
people forget about that. So
Totally.
sometimes I wish they called it quote to cash operations, but then it
Yep.
just doesn't sound as cool. You know what I mean?
And we're living in a world too where things like utilization, or for that matter, I'm blanking on the word, like the actual time capture or the consumption model, excuse me, consumption plays
Consumption.
into
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
they're being billed, right? So now it becomes
Right.
even further down the line. I've been in a handful of orgs where they're not even paying compensation until the customer is billed, or for that matter,
Oh yeah.
paying. Right.
Yeah.
So when you do that, now I'm taking it even further down the chain and actually having to do like the full revenue recognition before I can go back upstream and pay the rep in the first
Yes.
place. But I think it's
Yeah.
also interesting because I don't think, like, we didn't invent RevOps because it seemed like a natural
Right.
evolution. I think it exists because the customer journey like broke the org chart. Like those
Yeah.
marketing, sales, post sales functions were optimizing very locally instead of globally, and it needed to bring them all together. So we stopped making these massive tech stacks that were very siloed from each other, that effectively they kind of work in concert, and you're creating this massive intelligence layer that we have to have these days,
Right.
to operate in an
Yeah.
AI first world.
I think, dang, there's so much I want to say about that. I want the audience to know who you are and what you do first. I want to give you some time to introduce that, and then let's come back and talk about.
Sure.
I want to talk about standard business because that is your revenue operations. But now in the world of Lovable, do you know the app Lovable? Have you seen? It's all over
Love
LinkedIn now.
Lovable.
I
Mhm.
mean, yeah, it's great. until your CEO was like, "Hey, I had this great idea," and then they have a whole program built out. And you're like, "Whoa!" So tell the audience, just give us a quick snapshot. What do you
Yeah.
do? What's your position now? The teams that you lead. Clearly, we're both talking revenue operations. So what do you love about it?
Yeah. I have been in this space, we'll say over 10 years, just to keep me young. Started in sales ops, now in the revenue operations space. Where things clicked for me and where this became real was I started down the Salesforce journey like a lot of people.
Yeah,
I found myself rather quickly loving the architecture, the design, the builder side of things. I think Salesforce did an amazing job and still does at helping compartmentalize our thinking into this kind of transactional flow. And then over the
yeah,
last 10 years, we saw an explosion of go to market tooling. I love the intersection of the data and all of this. Like, that's one of the most, underserved areas of go to
mm,
market and
mm-hmm,
RevOps is when the data is good. The world is your oyster. You can move from being reactive to
100%.
strategic. The teams that I like to support, and I've been in a lot of roles, early stage, companies versus mature companies. I've been in where the tech stack was 35 platforms, and my remit was to rip out over half of them and consolidate that. Either way, I like the challenge, but I love the idea of bringing clarity. I think we
Yeah,
tend to overcomplicate things. It can be really confusing and difficult for that matter to tell a really loud sales leader that tool's cool, but no, it's actually not
100%.
needed. I can do it over here. It'll take me a while, but I can do the same thing.
Yeah,
That is the biggest challenge. And so we really have to be able to, I like to push the envelope around RevOps and say we're a product organization. We are
yeah,
going to buy things and build things. We need to use what we have to its fullest capacity. But data is truly like the currency of all of this. We have to have data to make
yeah.
really informed decisions. And all this cool stuff like Lovable, as you mentioned, make that possible.
Tell me more about so a lot of times when people say they're a product organization, they're saying product led. Like we ship
Mm.
product and then we iterate on it. So that's interesting. So what do you mean by we're a product organization?
We build and deliver, or we should build, deliver, and execute like a product team. When you look
Yeah.
at people that have been in a consulting background, and people again have a hard time sometimes consuming from consultants because it feels long, it feels drawn out, it feels ambiguous. But the typical delivery model is discover, design, test,
Mm,
and implement. And the reason
mm,
you do that is it's very easy to sit and say, I've got a problem and it's pipeline. It's another to sit down and unpack that and realize, okay, actually, your problem is a little bit of process, a little bit of
yeah.
pipeline creation, and half your team's doing it one way, the rest of your team's
Yeah. A
doing it
little bit of
another. And
discipline. Yeah.
yeah, like it's all got to
A little bit
come
of
into the
denial.
same thing. Yeah, 100%. There's a little bit of chaos, so I'm going to clarify your problem up front, and then I'm going to turn that into the ways in which we solve for that, some of those easy, some of those hard, and then we get to
Yeah.
building. But along the
Yeah.
way, it's iterative. And I think that's the other part of really operating like a product org is there needs to be clarity, but then there needs to be understanding that I'm going to deliver you a solution, but I'm going to keep building on that solution. And it is a flywheel that continues to grow.
Yeah, two threads I want to take on that. One is the data, which well, first off, shout out to Salesforce because I've said this a lot. Like,
Totally.
they built my career, and a
Yeah.
lot of us
Yeah.
have really amazing careers. And I used to joke that like no other company can literally sell out San Francisco City, once a
Yep.
year. Good luck getting a hotel during what is
Chaos.
their annual event called? I forget.
Dreamforce.
I I sent this is a horrible story. I sent one of my associates there because I couldn't make it. I gave him my Dreamforce ticket. We couldn't get a
Sure.
hotel in time, so he had this terrible hotel that would normally be like $60. They charged us $500 a night for it.
Like,
And he
totally.
told someone had like, he walked out to human feces outside of
A
his
hundred percent.
room because
It's a
he was in the
nightmare.
wrong part of town, And
Uh-huh.
I just always
Uh-huh.
remember thinking like that you're not getting anywhere in San Francisco when Salesforce decides to do their thing.
Not
So,
at
but
all.
anyway, yeah, back to WebRoot. There was Dick Williams was the CEO then, and I haven't seen if he was still with us, but he was in his 80s back then. And I remember they introduced the concept of a data lake to him, and that was back
Yes.
in
Yep.
2014 or so. And so he started the way I started in computer science, which is like this structured database. And, we all
Mm-hmm.
learned the Java and logical. So the data lake, this will get us into AI. It changed all that because you could just like throw a vomit of data
Yep.
there and we could see if your computer had the competitor's agent on it and maybe we were supposed to see that or
Mm.
not see it. We could see the last time it
Sure.
ran an antivirus scan. It could shape our marketing. I think what happened with the data is that even got we just the data kept compounding. That when you look at a good sales ops person, not just like a tech stack administrator,
Mm-hmm.
I love it when I can sit down with the CRO and say, listen, this isn't just about your sales guys and quotas. Like, you need to see a whole picture here. Like, this is how you're hitting the market, and this is what they're doing when this happens. And so I think that we hear a lot about signals now as kind of the new word for it. But where do you talk to me more about the data? And then like,
Mm-hmm.
there's managers in the world that will always be managers, but then there's like people who are VPs and C-suite that are visionary and they understand the scope of a business. So what do you
Mm-hmm.
appreciate with that data? How do you see your role in supporting these C-suite members? And then what does it mean to the business at large?
This is one of my favorite topics. Anytime I bring up data lake, I get really excited. I have big, big dreams of completely upending this
It's so
somewhere, but
it's so good.
it is so good. And shout out to our CPO at Laurel, Jay Z, because I've talked to her about this since I started. The big, big picture when it comes to data in my mind is that the only way to unseat or not end up beholden to a Salesforce, for example, is to be able to
Mm,
replicate that structured data in a database. Now, most engineers and most data scientists and most of these people that know how to run those models and run those platforms and orchestrate this information don't understand commercial data or go to market systems by any
yeah,
means, right?
yeah,
So we
yeah.
almost are forced to kind of pass our things through something structured like Salesforce. Where the real value lies in my mind, and what people aren't talking enough about, is that if we can build that well, manage that data well, and maintain the data quality,
Yes.
what you're creating is a steel thread from the second that lead comes in to when they
Hmm.
become a contact at an account, if we're going to use Salesforce lingo, to when they become an opportunity and they are the
Yeah.
signatory of that opportunity, and then an end user in something that you've sold them. We now have a steel thread that should not end in my system. It should get passed down to my
That's right.
product team, right? Now it's picking up product data, and now I'm creating a
Yes.
360 view of the customer
Yes.
and of that account. And this is where signals get good. If I can trust that that
Hmm.
data flows its way through, and now I'm paying attention to user signals and people
Hmm.
activating in the platform. And if I'm consumption based for that matter, activations equal more revenue. But without being able to do that,
Yes.
you're not going to be able to tell what true signals are there. Again, I'm looking at them in a really compartmentalized way. So to answer your second question around where I think RevOps needs to support executives in that journey, is understanding not only that's achievable, and that's achievable with a little bit of grit up front, because it is a lot of work to focus on those things, because
Yeah.
it's easy to firefight, it's easy to react to your end users and to
Yes.
worry about so and so over here that needs enablement. But building these things out takes a totally different mindset. It takes an engineer, it takes people that haven't
Yeah.
historically worked on the GTM side to build out that picture. But that's the unlock for AI. And without that, you're going to be trying to build AI on top of messy data. I have yet to see an organization that's been able to actually manage an entire commercial database at that level of proficiency to truly unlock AI and true signal intelligence on top of it. But that would be my dream.
Yeah. I've watched. So the AI company I'm consulting for now that shall not
Mhm.
be named, Acme.
I want to
It's really
know.
impressed me, and we can put our tinfoil hats on. I have this theory that they are trying to, and it's not just them. To be clear, like
Mhm.
every AI company out there, I think is onto this, and then the people that understand data the way you just explained it are onto this too. I think we're losing the boundaries or the walls or the boxes of applications.
Yeah.
And so there's almost this weird, I don't know if you ever remember that Tom Cruise movie way back when he's like moving the computer with his hand and swimming through the
Yes.
visual. They just
Yeah.
tried to remake it with it's called Mercy Seat. it's terrible. It's like a combination between Drudge Dread and something else. I'm like, no, you wrecked it. But anyway,
Don't ruin it.
I think we're getting into this world where you're not in, and again, full disclosure for later future, I'm not, I don't represent any of these logos, but like you're not in salesforce.com anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in Tableau anymore. You're not in even like Outreach or Twitter or X or whatever. You're
Yep.
just in the data. And then
Yep.
you're using whatever a console becomes in the future, whatever these AI platforms are, to swim through it and shape through it and follow a journey. Now, but what that leads me to, like you said, is right now AI is creating more noise and data for us because I don't think you have enough C-suite and really at least VPs that have visibility into business goals. They're not asking the right questions, you know?
Exactly.
They're not asking. I want your opinion on this, but I'll give you a mistake that I made. We had a
Mm-hmm.
deal on the antivirus company with a large cell phone company, and we were going to embed our antivirus solution into their home service package. And we were also SaaS, but we sold licenses. Well, we delivered to that cell phone company by giving thousands of bulk licenses as they deployed it. But if you never activate it, you know,
Right.
like that's not a signal. That's not, no one
Right.
used the product. And it was
Yep.
still
Yep.
way too early in cycle for us to understand signals. But when you start leaning into signals, like, oh, hey, I've noticed if I see an uptake in whatever XYZ, it's like there's an opportunity to quadruple
Mm-hmm.
to quadruple the upsell. And again, it's not always about the money, like I agree with you, but you need to know what your
Mm-hmm.
business opportunity is.
Totally.
And it might not just be license deployment. So what tell me more about these wonderful dreams you have about data and data lakes and what you could do with it, or even maybe if I could reframe that, what do you wish more leaders asked about
Oof.
instead of what you see them building now?
I think it's very, very easy. I'm going to use the AI example is just so relevant right now. It's very easy
Yeah,
to assume that one, any person and a RevOps team can jump into a tool like Salesforce and hands-on configure something and set things up. You know, the
for
more you
sure.
get into over 50 million ARR, for example, you have to have a protected environment. You can't have people overwriting things. You can't have a messy
Yeah,
environment. You end up with so much sprawl that has to be controlled. Now we're talking about how I streamline this data so that I can use it. The signals become super important. Not only do we need to know how we're selling it and what we're selling, but I need to be able to look into that. So, to kind of use your example a little bit of, okay, I sold something and now I need to kind of activate those seats. You know, activation is brand awareness. We're in a world of cutthroat. I can swap
100%.
you out today for something I can build
That's right.
internally. You know, somebody could code all of Salesforce. I mean, if they could, maybe they would, maybe they have. But I could rebuild Salesforce in a day. But can you actually use that in the same way that we need to? So in a lot of ways, it's like I've activated or sold this deal, but if I can't tell that people are using it every day, then I can't
Right.
guarantee that the brand is sticky in that company, and that when the day comes that they're looking to cut costs, because inevitably we all do, or they want to swap it out for something new, you aren't going to be able to speak to that value across the company because no one's actually
Yep.
using it. So again, it's like it feels, I wish more leaders wanted to talk a little bit about why the sticky stuff is so sticky to muck through, but the value of getting through it. Again, if you plumb that system and you care about the data quality being super high, and we're seeing that all the way through to the end, I can guarantee that we have supported making sure that that product that we're selling is sticky in that organization. If we aren't doing
Yeah.
that, then I'm just waiting for every single siloed function to drop the ball along the way. And maybe we're going to blame the implementation team. We think we lost them eventually. It was bad implementation 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That must have been it. They never really liked us in the first place, or our account manager hasn't been talking to the right stakeholders this whole time. Some of those things are probably true, but I think when
Yeah.
the system reflects the type of, again, customer journey you want, then
Yeah.
you're able to report on that all the time and really able to call BS on the function that's getting the finger pointed at it for not performing in that equation.
Yeah. I think so some people will say RevOps is a buzzword,
Yeah.
and I agree with you that it's just a more accurate description of the operational support of your revenue processes and
Mhm.
systems. Now, customer success was a buzzword, and I'll fight anyone. Like
Totally.
Gains,
Totally.
what Gainsight did was amazing. All the baseball
Mhm.
analogies. I
Mhm.
remember again, that was probably 2017 or 18, I forget, but like they sent one of our VPs over there, and she came back hyped, and she was no longer the VP of something, she was the VP of customer success, and they split my sales ops team in two, and like they put all my renewal people over here. And I was like, you just took our renewal people and told them to call the account quarterly, and like called it a
Yep.
playbook.
Yep.
But my point on that is like, one, even then, even when it launched, or at least maybe because I was serving MSPs who are like a small business, they knew this
Mhm.
is an
Mhm.
upsell call, like a
Mhm.
customer success, whatever. But two, like they're lying to you. Like anyone who
Yep.
knows sales knows the customer will lie to you. What's not lying to you, and I used to do this manually. This is an
Mhm.
example of signals for any CROs out there or CFOs that aren't on the tech savvy side. When we talk about signals, it's little nuanced things in your product usage that you might not have expected. So because I could see the usage on these licenses, I could manually go through. We had an account with PepsiCo actually through a different company,
Sure.
was also cybersecurity. But I could see. One day I pointed out to the senior vice president. I said, "Hey, just a heads up. Over the last year, PepsiCo's usage has been consistently going down 5% month over month. Well, a company like a PepsiCo is a mammoth aircraft carrier. They
Mhm.
don't just call you
Mhm.
up and say, "Hey, we're not going to renew." So
Yep.
it's like the signals in there start indicating to you that the usage is dropping, or even they're only using certain core features, and you can deduce a couple more things from that. One, you can predictably or reasonably at least forecast what's going to happen in the future. But two, you can even start asking yourself, like, of all the tech debt or money that we invested in development, what's like actually making my money? That was probably
Exactly.
$1 million a month account for that. What are they
Yep.
really using? Um,
100%.
Tell me, let's pivot some into like, actually, well, one thing I wanted to mention about revenue operations is I wish that people understood, if you told the CRO team, the sales guys, we can hire them unlimited because they make us money, right? And then when you look at the CFOs, it's like, oh, well, he or she saves us money on like net terms and things like that. Everyone has like an impact. The board will tell you go hire them, or the CEO is like, you're good to hire them. When you tell them you need more ops people, the answer is like, no, they're really expensive. And what are they
Yep.
actually doing for us? So maybe let's
Mm.
maybe we pivot into AI and operations at large with this. But I hope that anybody who looks back on these last 30 or 20 minutes, what you hear Lauren saying is saving companies a lot of money. And I wish more people understood that you're saving money on your ops side too. Where do you
True.
think, does that get, does the hiring opportunity or staffing opportunity, considering AI, is this getting worse before it gets better?
Mm.
Do you see a clear way to tell that story, that yes, we can do really cool things with generative AI, but you still need the people? If you had to
Yeah.
sit down with the CFO today, how are you explaining to him or her, like, this is why you're, and to be clear, these are six-figure operators normally. That's not
Yep.
the day of
Yep.
like a 60,000 a year sales enablement rep is kind of over. So like, this is why you need to pay 10 people 150,000 a year. This is what they're saving you. What is that story that you're telling the
Yeah.
CFO?
Man, this is a good one. Um, the hardest thing is that I think most executives don't get this in the first place. And I think being
Mm,
so far removed, sorry, execs, so far removed from the operations layer and the systems and the tooling and just the general landscape, is that you have to at some point really know what your go to market strategy is. And I mean end to end strategy, not just a revenue goal, but back into that revenue
yeah.
goal and how you're planning to hit it. And then you start talking about the plumbing behind hitting that. And I think, especially in this world right now, and I'm working in the startup space or the scaling space, being able to do that means now I have a very clear picture of what needs built. on the go-to-market or
Mm,
RevOps side? What kind of campaigns am I supporting with marketing? What tooling? What signals? Same thing with the sales motion. What's the sales process look like? Where is there friction? Do we want to
mm,
bring our contracting into the CRM and, do all these things? We can create a seamless experience. There is still a need to do the very fundamental things that we have to do to build that. And it's not super sexy. I might still be
yeah,
pointing my CFO at a dashboard in Tableau
yeah,
that, while stale once you start looking at it, is at least giving you a unified place to look at it. Now, where I think it's untapped and the tension I wish more organizations would create is have an appreciation for why that needs to exist, and
mm,
in the same conversation talk about what it means to enable all of those ops people to be AI focused or AI forward.
yeah,
And an example of that for me is, in building a lot of what we're doing day to day at Laurel, I sat here and I would get a request for reporting, or maybe my trying to think of
mm,
something more strategic and deep. Maybe my CRO wants to have a TAM analysis. Those things
mm,
take a lot of time. That is a
yeah,
strategic bit of work. It's going to take me weeks. I'm going to pull data out of a system. And the old school way of doing
mm,
it is to sit and do Excel spreadsheet or build a dashboard. And, you're piecing together a picture. But now with AI, because I know the data, I know the systems, I know the
yeah,
go to market motion, I understand the
yeah,
dynamics, I can hop into a tool that allows me to create that all in one place. We'll use Claude as the example, not what I use, but same principles apply.
mm,
Here's
mhm,
the information, here's what I'm trying to outline. Now let me sit here with 3 or 4 hours with Claude and actually build out an appropriate TAM analysis that
yeah,
gives you that insight in, a tenth of the time it would take to do it manually. And I think that's the part that's kind of like missing in all of this, is that it's not just, I think it'll get worse before it gets better, because I
yeah,
think so many of these executives are going to throw AI in the mix. You're going to see, like, go to market engineering is a great example. Half the people that market themselves as go to market engineers have never actually worked in a go to market
yeah,
organization. You can't just hop
yeah,
into a clay table and say you've solved all the world's problems. It might seem
yeah.
cool the first time you run it, but it doesn't actually apply in practice.
I had a colleague. We had a process for this AI client, and it was just onboarding their new hires. These companies are growing so fast that we had cohorts of like 50 to 100 people every week, and that would take 3 to 6 days for three of us. And
Mm.
she built a clay process done in 5 minutes.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole podcast on clay. And shout out to Clay.
Totally.
We're
For
partner
sure.
at GoNimbly. We're partners with Clay Enablement. Um, that one's interesting. That actually goes back to your concept of the data lake. I know that that's not how Clay would describe it, but
Right. Right.
Clay, well, actually, it kind of is their analogy. I used to tell people a spreadsheet back when I thought it was really
Mm.
cool in 2012. And like, oh, I learned cool formulas of spreadsheets. It's like this ninja sandbox where you could do all amazing
Oh,
things. I feel like
to-
Clay captured that. They were just
they
like,
did.
just dump a bunch of stuff in here and like twist it around and bam.
That was a massive
There's,
unlock.
it's huge. And I have a question about that. We're going to come back to that because that's
Sure.
not a data lake. That's like a, dang, it's, like, what
Exactly.
would you call that play? Like, you're in, if you've ever gone to a trampoline park, I take my daughters to a trampoline park every
Yeah.
once in a while
Yeah.
and they're just flipping off all the wall. That's what clay feels like. It's
It is.
outstanding. Everyone comes out there, you had a blast, and if you do it wrong, you might twist an ankle, and if you do it right, they're like, wow, this really rocks.
And it's
Here's the
truly
question I
your
do want to ask
orchestration
though.
layer. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, because I want to stay on this AI implementation thread for a minute. Here's what I'm worried about. There is a I did. I'm still a reserve Air Force. I'm a master sergeant in the Air Force now. I've been in a long time, and the younger troops are really young. I'm in my
Mm-hmm.
40s. These kids are like 18, and they still learn a trade in the Air Force or in the military in general, and that's great. So they come out as carpenters.
Mm-hmm.
Not a real blacksmith, but like metal workers.
Mm-hmm.
I learned technology in the Coast Guard when I was active duty. I learned a trade. What's interesting to me is, or in airline pilots, or the other example I'll give you to bookend this question, there's not enough young airline pilots to replace the retiring pilots. That's a
Mm-hmm.
problem because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not ready for AI to fly the plane yet,
Yep.
So
Yep.
like when this last consulting bit I did, which I also hate consultants, even though I am a consultant now.
I
If
feel
you've
you.
ever paid 40 grand for someone to
Yep.
like just give you a slide deck, you hate consultants. So
It
I get it,
hurts.
folks. I get it. But, but I was running through an onboarding, like a discovery, and I could just run it through AI. But because I had the 20 years of experience, I could use the tool. So what you were
Yep.
also just describing was years of experience, and you just know where to intervene, tweak, call it on its BS, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey there, chat. Like you get a little
Yep.
loosey goosey with that one, right?
Yep.
But what do we do about the really talented, I'll even just say mid 20s, late 20s that are never going to get that experience? Like how do they get their
Mm.
hands dirty and like do these things so that when you and I are off in the Bahamas retired, like the companies still keep making
Oh,
their money?
that's a hard one. Um,
Yeah.
and it's where I hope RevOps is shapeshifting a little bit. And I think these two things sit in
Mm,
parallel a little bit. Like, I still think the typical sales ops, rev ops functions need to exist alongside an AI focused team. It was exciting to see go to market engineers join the tribe of revenue
hmm.
operations teams because they do need to sit side by side. I also think this is the moment where, kind of going back to the idea of like a data lake or even just owning the data in a different way, where we as RevOps practitioners need to up level our chops too. Like I need to be able to talk like a data architect. I need to be able to work
Yeah.
like a data architect and actually understand what a data lake would really do to manage that data. So it's a kind of a double-edged sword in a lot of ways where if I'm able to upskill, I can bring these people along with me and start to teach them how to apply their way of thinking. It's a natural evolution. I wish there was like some sort of fun term to throw in here, but it's kind of a painful process you just have to bring people into. We have a great
Yeah.
example of a really young new grad. His first job is AI ops. He's awesome and he knows how to hop in these tools and build something out, but we are hand in
Yeah.
hand in 90% of what he's building. He's like, I need to send this. What do they care about? And so I don't know how you ever fully onboard them to our world, but I think there has to be a bit of a marriage there where I'm willing to kind of give up the things that I know. I'm willing to be a little less controlled and fixed in my approach and give
Hmm.
someone like him a little room to kind of, bowl in a china shop, like break some things, try some things.
Yes.
Because what he needs to figure out that I won't be great at is what works in the workflow layer for
Yeah.
all of this new AI capability. What works for the new breed of sales rep. We have a bunch of BDRs that are creating almost sometimes their own like CRMs with Notion. I'm like, this is cool, but hold on a second.
Yes.
We need to
Yes.
report on this. So let's talk about how we turn what you're trying to do into something that we can both use, which is why I probably call it a marriage.
Yeah, and
A
I
good
wonder
one.
if then maybe yes. I That's a fascinating point you made about the BDRs. I think that I fell in love with sales ops because I had the traditional technology background, like a break fix
Hmm.
technician and
Hmm.
API. But then I loved business. I remember I was reading Robert Kiyosaki and Good to Great.
Hmm.
I always forget if that's Jim Collins or Malcolm Gladwell. It's Jim Collins, right?
I think so. Yeah,
Good
it
to Great.
is. It is.
Yeah. And I remember I read Good to Great, and I was like, the military will never let me do this. And I left after 12 years and then got into technology. So I wonder if maybe there is hope then where you have the BDRs that understand the business and then just think, man, is there a better way that we can do this? And I wonder if that's what maybe I am because of all my experience, I'm pigeonholing the perspective because I think technology needs to be supported and reined in and tamed so it supports business goals. Maybe that BDR, when he or she's like stressed out over a spreadsheet, she's like, maybe there's a better way to do this. And
Mhm.
that's what sales ops looks like in the future. That is interesting. Maybe
I mean,
maybe
we're
we're
kind of saying that rev ops and sales ops become the product managers, right, for the revenue engine. So yeah, you
yes.
want to give enough room for these guys to sit and gals like to create and think outside the box, but then you have to kind of pull them back in. There's also something to be said, because we're living in a world here where we went from a few sales reps to over 30 in a matter of months.
Mm,
there was a bit of
Mm,
an absence of process to begin with, but now you drop them
hmm
all in and you're trying to, again, rein them in. So as things start to click, then it becomes this is the workflow and this is how you use it. Yeah, it's an interesting world where you're really trying to launch something thoughtfully, but give room for iteration, and you're not necessarily the one in control of the iteration. But when something's working and working well, again, your principles around what you care about are very different now. I don't care about
Yeah,
Salesforce adoption like I used to. I don't care
correct.
about Salesforce change management. I care that certain things are required at the right times and that the data is really good so
Right.
I can create insights. Everything else is up to you, so which is a different
Well,
dynamic.
I think that's the open canvas, and that's why I
Yeah.
always one of my other strangely favorite things in revenue ops to do is to talk to the CFOs because I feel like they're so ingrained in the numbers that when I can
Yep.
just say, "Listen, you hit 120 last year. Your goal is 150 this year. Like, how do we get the other 30?
Yep.
Let's start backing into." And who cares if we call it MQLs, then sales
Hmm.
qualified leads
Hmm.
accepted? It's like here's your average sale price.
Yep.
You need X amount of deals. We're going to need Y amount of leads to get those X amount of deals. And leads don't just come out of nowhere, like
Totally.
so
Totally.
that, and like you're saying, it doesn't have to be declarative or prescriptive where it's like, this is what we do with Salesforce or this is what we do with Marketo. That's interesting.
Yep.
Um, I'm curious. Let's pivot a little bit. Tell. You mentioned that you like to build. Do you have any really amazing wins that you love from your career, or and maybe even an early one and then a later
Mm-hmm.
one that trumped the early one? But what do you think back that you're just absolutely proud of or wowed related to either go to market or sales ops, revenue ops?
I'm gonna use a really old one and this is my first job out of college. I think I was like six
Mm,
months into the job, but the reason it matters, I'll get to. Again, this was the day we were implementing Salesforce at the time. I'm pulling hundreds of thousands of lines of Excel data and putting it into an Access database.
mm,
No one listening probably even knows what that is. And having to analyze it. And the problem I was tasked with is our XYZ business has dropped, X percentage, quarter after
yeah,
quarter. We're trying to figure out why. And this is the
yeah,
perfect thing you give an analyst, which is just go hunting for the
mm,
needle in a haystack. And so
hmm
you're pivoting all this data, just looking for some commonality. And at the time, you'd use conditional formatting. So where you are having a decrease, color code the lines red. And the next thing I knew, I'm just tinkering around and, a week of messing with this information and trying to ask around people's assumptions. Everything that was in the red, this was a big medical device
mm,
company. Everything in red had the word children's in it. And I'm like, interesting.
mm,
Everything
mm,
decreasing is a children's hospital. So I go back to
mm,
marketing and I'm like, what the hell? What's going on here? And they're like, I don't know. We'll go ask around. So they start asking sales reps that are in these hospitals every day. And they start realizing that they're all talking about a competitor that's running a massive program. They're about 9 months in
mm,
and they're specifically targeting one very specific SKU, but they are cleaning house on us. And we didn't even know about it until it
mm.
was too late because it's buried both within an
Yeah.
account and a product line. And it ends up being tens of millions of dollars when you add it all up. But this kind of
Yes.
revenue leakage is super hidden. And it was a really pivotal part of my journey because again, this tiny little bit of information existed in hundreds of thousands of lines and I had to really
Yeah.
synthesize through that. So that was a huge win because it really taught me the value.
That's
This is
so
why I'm
big.
probably obsessed with the data. Yeah, I'm sitting here going, that was buried, and we're talking about a very controlled, massive data capture environment that I have yet to actually get back to since then because I've never worked in a company that large since I left
Mm,
there. So it's probably like the early win. I think the late win that matters to me is coming full circle on that, walking into a company that had a bloated tech stack,
mm.
multiple different types of users using different systems. One sales rep was going, "Oh, I love this 6 Sense data." The other
Yes.
90% of them are like, "We don't even look at those fields." And so you start going,
That's
"All right,
right.
I'm gonna be the grim reaper of tools. I'm coming in and I'm cleaning
Yes.
house and I'm taking stuff out." And you start to realize that at the end of the day, everyone's kind of looking for the same thing. It's just not laid out to them in
Yeah.
a clean picture. So we went all in on like a really heavy
Yeah.
duty 6 month, just axing tools, cleaning up the data architecture, page layouts. And it was very aggressive. But at the end of the day, to sit and have the sellers, first of all, go, "Oh, it's so clean and tidy. And I can exist in
Yeah.
here now. I'm not scrolling 20 times." But then to be able to put
Yeah.
a custom UI on top of that, that is not a Salesforce UI,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually giving me this beautiful picture of here's all of my accounts, here's some of that intent data, here's some health scoring, and it's all consolidated in a beautiful like place for
Yeah.
me to action. That was the full circle moment of like, you can still get to all of that, but also I'm
Yeah.
now recognizing I'm displacing what I've known too. And now it's time for me to start thinking about how to create, the UI on top of that information.
Yeah. I actually think that's where AI wins is,
Agree.
again, like you're saying, if you stay disciplined on the processes and focused on what your business does, which is quote to cash,
Yep.
then like AI can be real fluid with the user interface. Then you could have talented people that you're controlling the what they have access to, and then the process dictates what they need to do, or at least the outcomes you
Mhm.
demand. But like the interface, do you really care if they're looking at like Gantt charts versus a
Exactly.
list? Yeah, that's fascinating. Tell
Mhm.
me about Clay. I'm just super
Mm.
curious. What's weird is I feel like we hear a lot about it. I know a lot about it because we enable it through our consulting arm. It's one of those things now where like you hear a lot about it, and I feel like still people don't know a lot about what to do with it. What do you love about
Yeah.
it? How do you use it now?
Yeah. So I think my first excitement over clay was I went, where has this been my entire career? Never have you ever been able to put everything in one place and just start to organize it and tinker with it. So I still love the buzzword, and I don't know if clay still attaches itself to this, but just orchestration.
Mm,
I think the other huge value add of clay is that you're not only able to orchestrate all of this data in one place, but I'm now able to model it with other sources. So we talk a lot about
mm-hmm,
enrichment in all of the go to market work that we do. Enrichment and most of the enrichment platforms are terrible,
mm,
if not
yes,
awful. I mean,
for sure,
they
for
all
sure.
have one or two positives and 20 negatives. And so again, you walk into these orgs where they'll have 3 to 5 enrichment platforms
Yeah.
because they all do something different. And at the end of the day, you're going to choose one to go all in on because you can't deviate from it. And at any given time, your perspective on what's accurate is a little different from the next guy.
Mm,
And so I think with clay, you're able to actually optimize for the way you see the world. You're also
mm-hmm,
able to think about, how do I now elevate kind of a workflow too? So if I want to
yes.
actually use AI to surface deal risk, I want it to
Mm,
enrich the count. I want it to triangulate call transcripts. I want it to bring in signals, but I need it to do all of that so that I can
mm,
bring deal risk forward. And that's where
mm-hmm,
Clay had us realize that we still need this structure of the data,
mm,
but I need the playground to use the data. And that's, again, one of
yeah.
those things that wouldn't have existed until Clay. We'd still be exporting into spreadsheets or trying to visualize it in Tableau, in my opinion.
Yes. That's interesting hearing you say that because the key difference that I've seen in Clay is you're always going into it with an end solution in mind.
Yeah.
And that's not always the
Mm-hmm.
same. Sometimes you're building out a CRM just because you think you're big enough as a company now. And like, I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
Salesforce still says this, but it'd be like, doesn't your company deserve Salesforce? It's like, so, and again, not disparaging Salesforce.
So
Thank you,
funny.
Salesforce, for a wonderful career. But every time you use Clay,
Yeah.
you're trying to, I hate to say solve a problem, but you're trying to do
Right.
something. That's a
Yep.
different state of mind. It's
It
not, you're not
is.
trying to store something.
It was the
Yeah,
first thing
that's
I wanted
fascinating.
was an engine. I want an account and contact
Yeah.
engine. I don't want to touch this data all the time. I don't want somebody owning 3 different enrichment platforms. I want everything coming in and everything existing on top of to constantly stay updated. I want a rep to get notified that somebody left the company. I want an inbound lead to get enriched with all the firmographic, demographic data attach to an account and come into, the workflow with everything that we already need. This idea that you have to like wait a couple hours for it to get enriched and all of this, like I just want the engine to run. And I tend to think
Yeah.
about Clay like that, like all of these little mini engines of things. And yes, I can test things,
Right.
but inevitably when that engine's working, now it's a product in my stack that lives in Clay.
Well, we used to have this concept of, so even in the API world, it's like sometimes that wasn't actually an integration. What you had is a series of time delayed batches. And it was like,
Totally.
and if one domino didn't go, then like this was just sitting here broke all night. And then, um, yeah, yeah, Clay really forced you to think through this end to end and build something significant.
True.
Lauren, what are you up to now? What are you looking for, either short term or longer term? And then if people want to connect with you, where can they
Mm,
find you?
great question.
Your company too. Like, what are you guys up to?
Yeah. So we are going through a really rapid scaling moment right now. Laurel is the timekeeping platform, but really like the data, the productivity data beneath it is the gold mine. So trying to be able
Mm,
to relieve a very, very critical pain point in this industry, both in accounting and legals, where we're primarily focused right now. But the
mm,
concept, and you know this very well, billing time. It's painful. You're having to think about how much time today did I spend with so and so. And if you're an attorney, for example, you're doing that hundreds, if not thousands of times a day.
yes.
But then when you're in a big business, you're really looking at now, what does it look like for everybody in this business? Are people
Mm,
spending an extra 10 hours a week doing manual research that, again, an AI tool
hmm
could enable? And you're able to make these more strategic decisions around how to get people time back, but also make them work more efficiently and effectively. So, as a company, we're on that fast path to let's get the product out there in people's hands and get to selling. So, it is a
mm.
ton of scaling. It's a lot of hiring, both on the product side and the commercial side. And
Were you
with
a
that,
founder on this one? Did I see that you're a founder?
no, that would be great.
Okay.
I wish. No, an early founding head of RevOps. So I was the first RevOps hire
Okay.
here to
Okay.
really come in and try to bring order to that. But again, in my first month, there were 3 sales reps. Within 6 months, there were over 30. So, the landscape
Wow.
and the requirements on a RevOps team is very, very different. I think from a personal standpoint, the things I'm really excited about building and doing outside of all the data stuff, and sorry, Benioff, but unseating Salesforce a little bit. And I think it still exists in all of this, but I want to create this alternative CRM experience.
Yeah.
I keep saying that I'm looking for the anti admin in this equation, but I really believe now is the time that we're going to start seeing the need for these very true blue engineering, product focused type people, those skills
Mm,
to come into the go to market side of things. Now, whether they're willing or not is the other thing. But somebody that can come in and really sit and go, okay, well, Salesforce's data architecture makes sense. I get it. It's easy. There's probably 1,000 principles to apply to all of that to make it more efficient, more
yeah.
effective. But we don't see these two type profiles cross each other's paths in the day to day, and they need to. So I'm really keen to get beyond the admin overhead of most of the go to market tech stack. And I go back
Yeah.
to kind of lovable. I want these custom UIs or these custom experiences.
Yes.
Salesforce is trying to do it with Slack and it works. But again, big adoption curve. So there's something to be said for just changing the way RevOps is seen as a product team and changing the way
Yeah.
we operate and deliver and build these really bespoke solutions for teams that are trying to work really fast and do it quicker than we have before.
Well, it's a paradigm shift. And yeah, same on my side. I don't wish any company ill will, but when you
Yeah.
consider a CRM by its nature, it's like a little black book, like you wrote down your names when you talked. Salesforce won because they integrated your entire go-to-market system in it, but that's very much like what you and I were talking about, a structured database. And I just think that the future is not going to have room for structure on the
Yep.
UI side. Like
Agree.
it's got to be I don't even want to use the word ecosystem because that's what Apple or Salesforce would call themselves, but it's got to be the
Totally.
environment of all your
Yeah.
collective signals.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe that's why orchestration is genius. Like I think the future
Yeah.
is with the orchestrations.
But you still have to serve
Lauren, it's
that
been
where people
amazing.
are. It's interesting. Yeah, it has.
You
So
do have to
good.
serve. Yeah, it's been amazing. I appreciate you. Thanks everyone. If you guys like this podcast, I want you to hit the like and subscribe button for me, and I'll see you guys in the next one.